Non. Et là, alors attends, là, ce truc-là, ça fonctionne pas non plus. Comme ça? Non, mais moi, ça me dépasse. À côté des trucs de la technologie, je n'arrive pas, moi. Maintenant? Maintenant, mais ça enregistre.
Non, écoute, attends.
Mais c'est Eliana. Elle a...
Attends.
Enregistrement là.
Ah non, enregistrement, c'est pas sûr. Ah bah non.
Okay, I sorted out the technology problems. I'm very sorry. So welcome to this new edition of the Castle Talks of Cross-Border Cooperation. I've actually stopped counting them, but it's so many. I think it must be at about at least the 30th or 40th edition. This edition is special because it's going to be at the same time the Castle Talks, the Symposium on Cross-Border Cooperation, and the final conference of our Cross-Border Center of Excellence. So you can see the sign here. It's a Franco-German Center of Excellence. I have been the director for 3 years of this Center of Excellence, and Joachim Beck from the Hochschule Kiel is the German co-director. So we are Franco-German. There are participants here today from the center who will be in the roundtable in order to debate on the results of the activities of the Center of Excellence. And I thank the colleagues for having accepted to come and participate in this debate. We have around 22 researchers from both the German side and the French side, plus some external experts like Bernard, Jean, and also Emmanuel Bruno-Jailly from University of Victoria. He cannot be with us today. This Center of Excellence has taken up the, it's a follow-up project on the first center, which was implemented in the years 2019 to 2022, right in the pandemic. This first Center of Excellence started with 3 types of activities. One axis of cooperation was the scientific work on cross-border cooperation on borders. And we started in the first Center of Excellence really with a focus on the Franco-German border region. The second, so we did research seminars, and we published also a book on this, which has been under the leadership of Joachim Beck. A second part was on formation, on education. And there we had some further education models already developed together with Ante Benet from the Euro Institute, who is our faithful partner also for the Center of Excellence. And we also had the nice project of a cross-border bachelor degree, which was a trinational bachelor on European studies and cross-border cooperation foreseen between the University of Freiburg, the University of Strasbourg, and the University of Basel. We had it already. We worked for 2.5 years, and then there was a political decision by the University of Basel not to participate in the project. So you can see that in cross-border cooperation, sometimes you also have failures that might not be due to the failing work, but or to problems in the project management, but simply political projects. But however, we managed out of this project to maintain an activity, which is a summer school, a trinational summer school, which we organize now every year in Freiburg with students from the 3 countries. And so this makes it also a partial success. The third project was the opening up to civil society. And the first Center of Excellence did some projects on for example, cinema on European issues in cooperation with the Odyssey here in Strasbourg, or we organized a festival on geopolitics with conferences, regular conferences on important issues in international relations. So that was the first Center of Excellence, and then I applied for a follow-up project, not thinking that it would succeed because it's very difficult to obtain. And we got it. We got it, and we were very pleased to be able to continue this work. And we have actually maintained the 3 axes of cooperation. And the first axis of cooperation on the research, we decided to open up on European cooperation, not only focus on the Franco-German border, because we have a beautiful network which is directed by Anne Thévenet at the Euro Institute, which is called the TAIN Transfrontalières Euro Institute Network. And this network is actually has a pool of competences from I don't know how many border regions, man. 12 border regions with a lot of researchers, which we associated to our research activities in the Center of Excellence. And so we decided the topic is the topic that you've been working on, some of you, unfortunately, a little bit with difficulties due to the closure of Sciences Po online. But the Americans here at the Château, we had the pleasure to do it en présentiel on the topic of resilience. Resilience, which is a kind of a keyword in border studies especially after the COVID crisis, which led to, but also maybe already after the migration crisis, which led to a lot of rebordering. And so the question was, well, how resilient are border regions in maintaining cross-border cooperation, integration, and links with the neighbors when we are in periods of rebordering? So that was the topic of the seminars, and we organized 6. And the panel that will be led by Anne afterwards is going to talk about these 6 seminars. So I will not go into details, I'll just maybe tell you what the topics were. The first one was in Kiel on the question of urban resilience, questions of local cross-border cooperation. The second one we organized on the, now I mix up the order myself, we organized it on the topic, I think it was economic resilience. We did that in the European Parliament, talking more about economic issues and opening up a little bit the question, also the European cross-border cooperation. We organized one in Eupen on the question of intercultural cooperation, which was well, outsourcing. We were in the beautiful border region of the German-speaking community, and we linked this cross-border conference with a really brainstorming event on the future, also on the research of cross-border cooperation, what we could do to maintain these research activities. We organized one on the so-called idées reçues, stereotype ideas on European integration, a little bit less focused on cross-border cooperation as such, but more focused on what perceptions we have on Europe and how Europe is threatened also by Eurosceptical movements and how that could maybe affect border regions. Some of you have worked on this issue as well. We had one, which was, it's my favorite one, on the administrative resilience, which we organized in Strasbourg, and which was in fact linked to an event where we invited the ambassadors of France who were competent on the different borders. And these ambassadors talked about the treaties, the bilateral treaties that were organized, that are now have been signed, but not always ratified, but have been signed. And there was a debate. And my favorite part of it was when, because this is the next section of the Center of Excellence, we linked it with an opening up to civil society event, which was a flamenco show on the interpretation of the border by flamenco, where we associated a group of pupils from the Collège International, and we took all the ambassadors to the flamenco show, and it was amazing because there was a real debate and a real encounter between these students. I remember Jean being next side to a student. Are you a minister? Are you a minister? And he said, no, I'm not a minister. And then they was discussing. They were really discussing, and this was an excellent. It's also how you can cross borders in different ways. That was my favorite seminar. So these seminars are going to be put together in a collective book when we collect all the contributions. That's the scientific part. Then we have a part also on education, formation, where we have a series of 3, or was it 4, 3 seminars on further education organized by Anne, which were very successful. And we have also the idea to create an online platform of so-called, well, it's kind of podcasts. We call them in French capsules d'enseignement, which were implemented by members of the Center of Excellence, and that will be put online on the website of the center, so we can have this as a pedagogical tool. And there was also in formation is also the idea to develop a master in further education on cross-border cooperation. So these are the projects in this axis of cooperation. And we had a last, the opening up to the society was the flamenco show, but not only, we also had 2 more events in the Center of Excellence. One was the public reading of a text by a professional actress here on a text on the border and by Hemingway, Ernest Hemingway. It was really excellent. So there was the students were here, and she was performing, and there was a real debate on the basis of this interpretation. And a very interesting project was also my colleague from who is professor in architectural studies and who is also a sculptor, and who associated the students to interpret the border via a sculpture in the château. So they were drawing lines with, there was these fil, and it was like a spider web that they constructed in the château, and it was an exhibition, and it was another way to approach the border yet again. So these were our activities. This is the final conference, so we finished all events. We have to still prepare the deliverables for the European Commission, but I think what we can say already is for the Center of Excellence that it has been successful, because we have maybe sometimes you're not successful in implementing everything so as you have foreseen it at the beginning. Sometimes we only have 1 contribution in the scientific conference, a written contribution instead of 6, or sometimes you have to change a little bit the topic, or sometimes you also have maybe not so many students participating in the sculpture. They were not always there, but it doesn't matter. What's important is, in fact, to be able to work together on the topic of borders, to work in the context between France and Germany in difficult times when we have a really rebordering, and when you kind of maintain these links and you foster the links even more, and you create even friendship across the border with colleagues. You enlarge this even in a European context. That is really important, because that makes us as researchers resilient to continue in border studies. And the second part is also the students. I mean, I'm very pleased that the Center of Excellence can enable you to follow these kind of conferences here, to be able to present, to get to know each other between American students, European students. You're now the visiting students. In the fall, it's always the master students, but it enables you also to have a different setting, to get to know specialist researchers on a topic that you wouldn't maybe study if you were not here in Strasbourg or at the Château, if you were not linked to the Center of Excellence. And I think because it's you, the future of border studies and European integration depends on you. And if you want to continue this work that we are doing now, and that I think is an important issue, and that makes me also gives me the enthusiasm and maybe also the motivation, although I have so much work to do and I would better not do it, to apply maybe for another Center of Excellence after this one is finished with a new project in order to be able to continue this work. Okay, Joachim is probably going to arrive at some point, unless he has been captured at the border and stopped by the police. I will suggest that we now start with the conference, and that he can always then adapt and do a small conclusion from the German side. I think that would be perfect. Yeah, Anne, so please, and if I can invite. So thank you very much, and so we're looking forward to the discussions now. Ah,
Je peux vous demander encore une chaise. Ouais, encore une chaise. Mais on prend celle-là. Voilà. Ready to go?
You speak English or whatever?
English.
Okay.
Good. Well, I think time to start the roundtable, and thank you very much, Sasha, for this introduction, and thank you for giving me the possibility to moderate this discussion right now. As Berthe mentioned, the center has really achieved very much. You have had a small picture of what has been done during this second version of the Center of Excellence. And now we will see with some of the key actors of the center what has been concretely done and what we could learn from it. And you might have some questions, and we will have the opportunity also to discuss a little bit together. So I'm very happy about that. But first of all, you might ask yourself, who is on this table? And I will let, of course, all people present themselves also, but maybe 2 words about me. I have the pleasure to be member of the Center of Excellence for the 2nd time, and I'm the Deputy Director of a cross-border institution located in Kiel, just on the other side of the Rhine, here near Strasbourg, but on the German side. And we are specialized in training and counseling on cross-border issues, much more on the practitioner side, but we are really eager also to bring practitioners and researchers together, and if possible, also students and politicians, in order to have all competences around in order to discuss some of the main issues of cross-border cooperation. But enough talked about me right now. And as I said, I have the pleasure to have 4 great people around me. And maybe the best thing I can do is give them the floor in order to present themselves, but maybe with some aspects I want them to stress on, namely if they can present themselves on the one hand, but also explain what was their role in the Jean Monnet Center. And therefore, I might begin with William Gasparini, who is professor at the University of Strasbourg, a colleague of Berthe Wassenberg, and who is thereby also part of the lead partner, so to say, of this center. William will answer the questions in French and Birte will translate. Et donc, William, eh ben, je vous laisse vous présenter en tant que professeur de l'Université de Strasbourg et donc porteur aussi un petit peu venant de l'institution porteuse donc du centre Jean Monnet. Et l'idée, c'est que vous puissiez vous présenter un petit peu plus en détail et surtout peut-être évoquer quel a été votre rôle dans cette aventure du centre Jean Monnet.
Thank you. I will try to speak in French.
Oui, je traduis. I was a new role. I will translate that.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Donc, je suis sociologue, professeur à l'Université de Strasbourg. Je suis spécialisé dans l'analyse du sport dans la société contemporaine. Et j'étais titulaire d'une chaire Jean Monnet qui portait sur le sport et l'intégration européenne.
So William is a sociologist and he specialized in the analysis of sports in European society, and he has had a Jean Monnet chair on sports in Europe. Is that right?
Alors, je suis un ancien membre du Centre d'excellence Jean Monnet, puisque j'étais déjà présent dans le précédent. Et dans le Centre Jean Monnet, dirigé par Birte, j'étais responsable d'un séminaire sur le sport vecteur de diplomatie, notamment diplomatie interne à l'Europe.
So he was a member already of the first Center of Excellence, which I've presented, and now in the second one, he had this responsibility on a seminar on sports as a vector of European integration and also cross-border cooperation.
Je suis également membre du conseil scientifique du Centre d'excellence Jean Monnet. Et j'ai aussi réalisé une capsule, tu as parlé de capsule d'enseignement sur le sport et l'Europe.
Sorry to interrupt. Harald, komm doch rein. You wanted to stay and speak, so you wanted to say. Okay.
I will make my hello tomorrow.
Yes.
I'm sorry that I just jumped. It took me an hour from Kiel to here.
Yeah, because Joachim is still stuck in
Oh, yeah.
in the. That's why. Sorry, he's still stuck in the. Yeah. Yeah, so what's yeah, Harald?
I think there's some, the board is okay, but I think there's some construction and whatever detour I took, nothing worked.
Yeah, because our German, I mean, Michael has waited the first.
Yeah, no.
And we're still waiting for poor Joachim. I don't know where he is, but okay.
It was probably behind me somewhere.
Okay, so William has also done one of these capsules d'enseignement, which is, podcast for the Center of Excellence.
Okay.
Merci. Thank you so much. And now I will look on the other side and to Michael. Michael Frey is professor at the University of Applied Science in Kiel, and therefore also one of the main partners of the Excellence Center. And I will ask you the same question. Could you please present a little bit more yourself and your role in this project?
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, I'm professor at the University of Applied Sciences in Kiel. The University of Applied Sciences in Kiel is specialized on public administration. And in this university, I'm a professor for public law. And so in this cross-border Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, I had, on the one hand, I was the binôme for Frédéric Perrault, which is also a law professor. We meet our research interests in European law, in cross-border cooperation law, for instance, the Treaty of Aachen. And on the other hand, I was a bit complementary to the University of Strasbourg, for instance, as a University of Applied Sciences, as you mentioned, Anne. I have always in mind to keep research applied. So I'm always tending in developing innovative solutions, legal solutions for cross-border obstacles, which are still many, and often it's systematic, so there's still much to do. And one of the advantages in my career is that as a professor in a University of Applied Sciences, before becoming professor, you have to have a professional period in as a practitioner. And my period as a practitioner was also in the cross-border cooperation. I was German head of French-German citizen office called Infobest, a sort of one-stop agency, cross-border one-stop agency. And on the other hand, I had been the secretary for the German delegation in the Franco-German Swiss Upper Rhine Conference, which is responsible for solving all the administrative and legal issues in the cooperation between the public administrations. Therefore, I had two roles. One was the legal role part Germany. The second one was a bit getting it in an applied way. And what I really liked in this adventure, and for me it was not an adventure, it was a pleasure, was that we had always this opportunity to meet colleagues, students, practitioners from other scientific disciplines and other countries. And that was a really nice thing, because when you want to research in cross-border anything, you have to be open for other scientific disciplines. And therefore I enjoyed very much this coming together everywhere, meeting friends of other scientific disciplines, mixing ideas, developing ideas, reflecting on issues. And that is the key advantage of this adventure. And for me personally, it was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Michael. And then I will give the floor to Jean Perroni. You are director of the Mission Opérationnelle Transfrontalières. You are also a faithful partner of the Excellence Center and the second one also. And you are much more on the practitioner side, but I will let you a little bit explain, maybe for those who don't know, what is the MOT doing and what was your position and your role in the center.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Well, basically, Mission Opérationnelle Transfrontalière is based in Paris. It works on all French borders, terrestrial and maritime, both sides of the border. It really supports cross-border projects on the mutual interest on the two sides of the border. And so mainly we work for local authorities or local actors to help them to build these cross-border projects, public services, cross-border strategies, governance. But for that, we work also with the national level. We are supported by the French government, working also with the Luxembourg or German or Italian government. And we work also very much with Europe. Europe is the Commission, the European Commission, the Parliament, Committee of the Regions. They act for cross-border cooperation, so we also interact much with them. And why I was in this project, the point is I was asked to, because I am basically a practitioner. I'm not an academic. And I would say that I don't know what if I benefited to the project, but I know that I myself benefit from it, because I think that when you are a practitioner, and I've been working for something like 40 years in spatial planning, my basic job is spatial planning. I did it at regional level in Paris region. I did it at national level, French administration. I did it even in the Commission, European Commission, as a seconded expert. And now I do it on the cross-border context. But in all these cases, spatial planning first consists in understanding territories and sharing a common understanding with the citizens, with the businesses. Before making public policies, spatial planning should be to know better what surrounds you, the opportunities, and also the obstacles you have across all sorts of borders. And for that, you need to work with academics. You need to try a little bit to explain what you know, including to students or to future professionals. And I would say this is particularly true in the cross-border context, because borders are one of the most difficult things to think. And I guess we will certainly discuss that later in the panel. But I mean, borders is something many ordinary people don't understand, politicians don't understand, and even us working on that topic, we still discover things about borders. And this is really where we need to work with academics, because academics try to think right, and they have also a critical approach, which is very much interesting for us practitioners.
Thank you so much, Jean, for also making the links between the practitioner side and the research side, and highlighting the importance of the dialogue between them. And now I move to Bernard. Bernard Heitel, you are a professor of the Université d'Artois, and you are also an expert of the center, the Jean Monnet Center. And again, the same question. Maybe you can explain a little bit more what is your profile and also your role in the center.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So I am professor in political and urban geography at Artois University in Arras. I guess that all of you know where Arras is located. It's a middle-sized city located in northern France, and it's world famous because in the city center you have two squares which were built in the 17th century in Flemish Baroque style. So if you go to northern France, go visiting Arras. It's really wonderful. So my work, I'm working on the effects of European integration on border towns and cross-border conurbation in Western Europe. And I'm examining functional, institutional, and symbolic integration from a multiscalar perspective. And I obtained a Jean Monnet chair on borders and European integration between 2017 and 2020. In fact, I played, I think, a peripheral role in this excellence center because I am based in this university, which is located more than 500 kilometers from Strasbourg. So you can imagine it's a very long, takes a very long time to come from there, even if you have a high-speed train line. However, I think the main role in this excellence center was when I organized with Michael, Philippe Amann, and Birte Wassenberg a seminar on resilient borders and urban scales. And I will talk about it in a few moments. And I didn't say it, I guess, I think. In fact, I continue to work on cross-border cooperation on the Franco-German Franco-German-Swiss borderlands.
Thank you so much, Bernard. So you have now a better idea who is in front of you and what were the role in the center. And now we will go a little bit deep in our topic. And as Berthe mentioned it in the introduction, the main theme, the main thread of the center was resilience. Resilience might sound maybe a little bit fashionable nowadays, especially since COVID time. Everything should be resilient, every person should be resilient. But what is resilience? I understood a little bit from Berthe what she said, that you worked also maybe on this term in the last few weeks. Maybe in the discussion we might go deeper on it, but it was interesting maybe for me to ask our panelists, what do they understand under resilience? And I come back to Michael and Bernard, because the seminar Bernard just mentioned, I unfortunately did not have the chance to go to the entire seminar, but I was only there for the second part. And on the next day, I had a few students from Philippe Amann, another colleague, and we talked about the seminar. And the first thing they came with is, oh, this topic resilient. We didn't dare to think that it was so broad, so bright, and that there were so many different interpretations of it, or so many things that you can put into it. And so I thought it was maybe good to now, if we talk about the center, which was focused on this, to stress a little bit on what is resilience. And there, because I have this experience with your seminar, maybe I come back to Michael and Bernard first, and let then our two other panelists and maybe you also react on the definition we could find together. But I don't know if Bernard or Michael, you will. Bernard, please.
So I will start. In fact, what is resilience? Resilience is a concept that can be defined as the ability of a system to regaining balance after a crisis. It's very, it's a little bit simple to say that. In geography, more specifically, resilience refers to the capacity of a territory. A territory, it's a space appropriated by a population or by a public body. So it is the capacity of a territory to mobilize resources to adapt to the destruction of the living space of its inhabitants after a disaster. In particular, this raises the question of the ability of public authorities to face up to the challenge to manage the crisis by identifying human resources and mobilizing territorial intelligence. What is territorial intelligence? It is the know-how available in a local context. So people, association, organization, firms, etc. And resilience is a concept that is widely used in risk culture. In particular, it involves providing innovative responses to create a new territorial dynamic. So this political approach requires both social innovation on one side and the ability to coordinate players in a given area. And the problem is that the international border is an object of regulation, of course, an object of control, but on the other side, it's also an object of separation and of distinction. So if a border region is faced with a crisis or a trauma, this raises the question of coordination between the public authorities on either side of the border, but also of the scale of intervention. So which authorities will be involved? The local, the regional, the national, or a partnership between all these authorities? This, of course, is a problem of governance, except that it needs to be considered both vertically between each level of organization and horizontally on both sides, on either side of the border. So that's the way I think I can speak about resilience in a cross-border urban context.
Thank you so much, Bernard. It was a very exhaustive definition. I don't know if Michael, you want to share some point or add some ideas?
Yeah, from a legal perspective, I would say I always had in mind this 4R definition of Charles Edwards: robustness, redundancy, resourcefulness, and rapidity. And then I started to reflect on are border regions, cross-border regions, are they resilient? First of all, in a stable situation as we often had, and there the question would be, oh, are they rapid? Are they able to react rapidly? And then we think on this idea of horizontal governance, which is a bit of soft, smooth, reactive system of cross-border governance. And in this normal, stable situation, I would say cross-border institution and cross-border cooperation as a system of horizontal governance is resilient. But what happens when we have a sort of crisis? There we discovered that cross-border cooperation was interrupted. And then we had a sort of fallback, an idea of path dependency, where the national states took back the competences and closed the border, restricted the borders, and not their internal borders, of course, the external borders, so the internal borders of the European Union. And then the question is cross-border cooperation robust to this situation? And there I would say, no, it isn't. And then we probably have to go beyond and reflect, how could we design cross-border cooperation after the crisis, before the next crisis, more robust, in order to be able to guarantee this cross-border mobility, this cross-border interaction, this 360-degree living space of border regions, even in periods of different crises imaginable. And therefore, my focus was reflecting on which legal tools could be used to design this kind of robust, resilient cross-border cooperation in our legal systems. Enough?
Enough, and it means we have still a lot of work to do, so perfect. Now we'll ask also William, maybe as a sociologist and specialist in sports, what is your interpretation about resilience? En tant que sociologue du sport, votre interprétation de la résilience?
Alors, je partage ce qu'ont dit mes collègues, Bernard et Michael. Je n'ai pas appliqué vraiment ce concept dans le domaine du sport, mais en même temps, je sais qu'un territoire résilient dans le domaine transfrontalier, c'est en fait un territoire qui a la capacité de pouvoir surmonter des conflits, des crises. Ça peut être des crises sanitaires, du dérèglement climatique, et ça suppose de partager une culture commune pour affronter ces crises. Donc, ça suppose qu'il y ait une action publique qui soit transfrontalière et qui permet d'être en capacité de répondre à ces problèmes que les sociologues appellent des problèmes publics, c'est-à-dire qui se posent à de nombreux citoyens de part et d'autre de la frontière. Donc, la frontière disparaît et le territoire peut être en capacité de développer ce nouveau système.
Okay.
Merci.
Long, but so he does not really apply the concept of resilience in his research, but he agrees with the colleagues who say that a cross-border territory is resilient. The capacity depends on the ability to manage or to get over crisis, for example, sanitary crisis or other crisis. And this needs, this supposes that you have a shared culture and that you have public, cross-border public action or policy. and that you call this in sociology to deal with public problems, is that right? And that in this case, then the border disappears. Yeah, hope I translated correctly.
Thank you so much. And now I'm looking forward to the answer of a practitioner. And what do you understand from the word resilience, maybe in addition to what has been already said?
Well, it's clear that resilience is about going through crisis and learning from them, I would say. And as we are a little bit under the patronage of Jean Monnet, I would quote, it's a classical quote, but perhaps you don't know it as well. It's Jean Monnet said that Europe progressed through crisis and is the sum of the solutions given to this crisis. And I think it's really particularly very concretely true about the COVID crisis and the border crisis that we left during the sanitary crisis. And because, well, all over the world, all sorts of borders were closed, but people living near these border regions, they were really hit even more severely. MOT, as we are practitioners, basically we are in Paris. We were all teleworking at that time, but we tried to collect all the experiences on French and other borders. We were even asked by the Commission to make a sort of survey of not about the sanitary aspects, but about the effects of the abusive border closures in the spring 2020. And it has been really, I would say it's difficult to say it was interesting because people suffered and it was very negative. But on the other hand, it was really a moment not to better understand, because we us people working on these borders, we understand a little bit that. But it was a moment to see that most of the administrations, not only national administrations, even regional or local administrations, most of the politicians, most of the people simply don't understand the border. So, and we had really a crash test, and a crash test showing that when there is such an event, the reflex come back, and you think that you can control things through closing borders. In fact, it doesn't work. Very concrete example was when the Luxembourg government asked the French government, please don't close the border, because most of the staff of the hospitals in Luxembourg, they come from France, particularly the nurses. And so if we would have closed the border, there would have been a collapse of the hospital system in Luxembourg. So basically, it was an opportunity to realize that in these border regions, people live or try to live across the border, and that people are not only workers or users of public services or citizens, because, I mean, we are told in Europe that a national citizen is also a European citizen. So the border should be open, but it was not the case. And so we are not only citizens, users, economic actors, we are persons, we are connected people. Sometimes our family is the other side of the border. We can have children or parents to visit the other side of the border. And I think it has been a moment to realize that the public policies should really address persons living in cross-border living areas. And it's really a time to not invent, but to develop more border-sensitive policies. And it's something for national policies to connect better with local policies and to connect across the borders. It's also a moment for the EU to play more its role. And just to give one example, we have a Schengen regulation in Europe, and the fact that borders are supposed to be open, except when the countries need to control them for this or that reason. But in any case, and the legislation has changed now in Europe. When the states have to re-establish some control, they have to take into account the effect on these cross-border living areas. So I am optimistic, I would say. I would say that we are probably in a path to learn more about the way to manage these borders in a still open approach. But this is really not obvious, because you have also to fight against biases, prejudices, things that are in the minds of the people and who always want to, take back control or control something with closing borders, which is not appropriate.
Thank you so much, Jean, and all the others for giving us more insight in this word resilience. And maybe this is the first round of discussion that I want to open with the room and the participants, because first, as I understood, Berthe, some of you worked also on the topic of resilience, and might be interesting to exchange also your point of view or your reaction towards what just have been said. And also maybe your understanding of resilience coming from other part of Europe or the world, because we are much more focused on the Franco-German border or the other French borders, but it's still limited maybe to in comparison to the spaces that you are representing now. And so if you have some input, insight in what is resilience for you, or if you have questions on this topic for our panelists, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I have a quick question. How important is history when it comes to part of your research? Is it something that you guys look at to kind of support your thought process on how to deal with things in the current, like at the present time? Does that make sense? Like, how important is historical events that have happened in the case of like resilience supporters when it comes to how you guys perceive things in present time?
La question est, est-ce que vous prenez en compte la dimension historique quand vous pensez à la résilience, ou vous le pensez là maintenant tout de suite en fait?
I don't know if somebody feels a spontaneous reaction.
Perhaps I guess that the way it has been lived in Western Europe and Central Europe can be different because of history. What I remember, I think that well, in Western Europe, if you take the French-German border, clearly it's a story of reconciliation since 1945, by the way, and many people felt committed. I mean, well, the negative aspect was that for some people, suddenly they distrusted again the other side of the border, and it was a negative feeling. But I would say that most of the actors, after this catastrophe and the closing of the borders, they thought, well, now we have to act because of the story of this reconciliation, and we have to take back the contact and to keep this trust. And I think there was some resilience there. I was told, I'm not a guy from the Central Europe, but on these borders, it was a little bit more difficult, I guess, because the experience of closed borders was closer, because even in the Soviet bloc, the borders were inside the bloc, and the borders were not so much open. And I think that some people felt that they were back in this old communist world, and it has been, I think, a negative experience, not that easy to make positive again. That's what I would say.
Other reaction? Or maybe from the historian between us?
I don't know, discussing the same class, right? Because if you ask a historian, is history important? The historian will say, of course. But I think the historical elements always play an important part in maybe in order to explain in each border region, in order to explain the factors that might be either favoring or resilience or being an obstacle to resilience. If you take, I'm together here now with the Catalans from in the Catalan region, you have a regional language, you have elements of unity, which can foster a strong regional identity in the region that can be favorable to resilience. In the Franco-German region, there used to be the scars of history with the 2 world wars, and it was difficult to engage with a neighbor, and sometimes you can see when we had the COVID crisis, we had the ressentiment. So that can only be explained by history, that suddenly you talk about the neighbor again as if he was again your enemy. You cannot explain it if you don't understand that Alsace has been shifted 3 times between France and Germany, and that there were two world wars, and that this was really painful. So I think it's crucial, of course. Yeah.
And maybe also because, of course, we have been resilient in the past, but we didn't call it resilience. So
Exactly.
it's sort of a new term that appeared. And so if you do research, you won't find something about resilience 40 years ago, but there has been some point. But, yeah. Are there any other reactions or questions maybe in the room? Yeah, please.
This is a question in regards to what was said about COVID-19 and how it affected the borders. Like, I just wanted to know what ended up becoming of whenever they were talking about the borders being closed. And for example, people in France have worked for hospitals and would go to like Luxembourg to go work in the hospital. What ended up happening with the borders during this, and how did it affect your thoughts at all, if they have affected them, on resilience of the borders?
Yeah, we had several research seminars on the.
This is a complex question you asked. From my perspective, legal perspective, I would say resilience and reconciliation in our border region, it's transposed into our legal system. When you compare, for instance, sort of opening clauses, exceptional clauses, which are allowing a different solution for cross-border situations. And then you discover in the very beginning, it was very strict, limited, geographically limited. For instance, this treaty on double imposition questions. It's very strict. And then it's gained more situative and more open. And in this COVID crisis, we discovered, oh, it's getting restrictive again. So you may transpose this kind of inside-outside idea into law. And in the good times, we start to get this idea of we are both inside. We are inside of European Union. We are neighbors. We are in the same house, in the same global village called European Union. And now the interesting thing is what we will learn out of this kind of crisis. How could we avoid legal solutions necessitating local or geographical regions? I mean, it's difficult for geography, but the idea must be, let's find some functional solutions which are not regarding borders. That would be, in my personal legal opinion, it's only a part of the answer of your question, but there are many other scientists who could answer from their perspective.
Someone want to react? Or...
A complex question. Let's discuss later on.
Maybe another question, or if this is not the case, yeah, please, just the last one before we move on, please.
I need to write it down for you, but I'll just kind of free-flowing. But in our presentation, we're discussing the topic of migration, specifically on the Balkan route and Mediterranean route. And I know
Dr. Bernard mentioned authorities' ability to handle crises. So in our topic, and especially specifically in one of the slides I'm dealing with, is how like Greek authorities are actually having a negative impact in terms of, handling the crisis going on this route. And I wanted to see if you guys could delve into more about what kind of negative impact, having I don't know how to express it, but like how authorities can also have a negative impact on resilience in terms of migration.
Dans la résilience, c'est particulièrement sur la question de la migration. Mais je pense qu'elle comprend la migration comme aussi l'immigration frontalière, mais je suis pas sûre.
Good question, but I don't know if we have.
Very complex question,
yeah.
so it's difficult to answer.
But I can say what I mean. Migration is incredibly
Yeah.
complex, and I'm not in my area of knowledge. But what I can tell is about the interaction between these migrations that are global phenomena involving, of course, states and the EU and so on, and the local authorities. What I can tell is at the moment in a country like France, it's not optimal, I would say, because you have a sort of, if I take, for instance, I mean, two borders are interesting to consider because they are disymmetric and opposite disymmetry, I would say. It's Italy and France and UK. Italy, France, I mean, basically migrants come through Italy. They want to cross France to go to UK or to go to north of Europe. And of course, the Italian, they try to do what they have to do, but they don't always prevent the migrants to try to cross the border. The French police is supposed to avoid that because legally, even if this legislation is not appropriate, it's up to Italy to manage its migrants. And the point is that the French police sometimes does things that can be dangerous and that can endanger the life of the migrants because they try to cross ever more in the mountain when it's dangerous and so on. And so the local authorities or the civil society, well, they are there. They try to save the migrants, basically. And it's also their duty somewhere. And I guess that's more cooperation between national authorities and local authorities and more cooperation across the border between the national governments and the local authorities as well would be better. And certainly, I mean, this is a very complex problem, but certainly in Europe, the solution should come from Europe, the management of external borders and the work with the countries of the South, I would say. And cooperation between the states and not this stupid what happens now on the borders where the people so certain, I mean it's not so far from the lessons from the COVID crisis. I mean it's also a question of cooperation and not considering the border as a sacred line, I would say.
Bernard.
Well, it's very difficult to answer to your question, but I think on one side, you have to consider the point of view of somebody who wants to move. I think people want to move because they want to improve the situation, and they can't live well in their own country, so they are moving. But on the other side, you have to imagine that, in fact, we're focusing on international migration, and in fact, a lot of people are moving inside their countries between cities, between the rural areas and the cities, between regions, and so on. I moved several years ago between Strasbourg and northern France, and it's only 500 kilometers. You're living in the same country, but your everyday life is really changing completely. The other one is about the border. In fact, and I will say the states and the way the states are considering migrants, and you have different types of migrants. On one side, you have refugees. On the other side, you have, well, it's very a little bit simplistic, but on the other side, you have economic migration. And I think each country has a different policy about migration. And it can change in time. And I think migration is currently the topic which is one of the most instrumentalized by some parties and also some medias. So I think it's on one side, it's a real challenge, but on the other side, we have to be very careful because a migrant is a human. It's not an animal. So the question is very open, I think, and it's very difficult to solve the challenge of migration in the current time.
Thank you so much for those contributions. And I think through the discussion we had, we saw that the word resilience is very complex, rich, and so were also the activities of the centers, rich and very different also. Berthe mentioned a lot of them in the introduction, but now I wanted to know which were the activity that had been the most significant for our panelists, because of course we all had the opportunity to take part to some, I don't know, but many activities of the center. But I can imagine that there is one activity that was much more significant, maybe the one you organized or one you participated in. But William, quelle serait l'activité du centre qui a eu qui a été la plus, qui a eu le plus de signification, qui a été la plus importante pour vous?
Alors, je n'ai pas suivi toutes les activités du centre, mais je peux parler du séminaire que j'ai organisé en mars 2024, qui portait sur le sport comme facteur de résilience, mais surtout de rapprochement des peuples, des citoyens, entre deux pays ou entre plusieurs pays. On appelait ça le sport vecteur de diplomatie. Et donc, ce séminaire, j'ai trouvé qu'il était intéressant parce que, d'une part, il confrontait plusieurs chercheurs de plusieurs disciplines, des historiens, des politistes, des sociologues. Donc, je l'ai co-organisé avec Jean Sherman, avec un jeune collègue de l'Université de Lorraine. Il y avait une chercheuse de l'Université de Lausanne, un chercheur de l'Université de Franche-Comté. Mais en plus, on a fait intervenir des acteurs qui font la promotion, le développement de la coopération transfrontalière à travers le sport. Il y avait par exemple la responsable des actions du sport transfrontalier du comité olympique sportif du Grand Est. Il y avait un représentant du Conseil de l'Europe qui était aussi intervenu. Donc c'est ce mélange qui m'a beaucoup intéressé entre les acteurs du transfrontalier et des chercheurs. Et donc, nous avons échangé, d'autant plus que nous étions dans le contexte des Jeux Olympiques, la préparation des Jeux Olympiques de Paris. Et donc, c'était intéressant d'utiliser le sport comme terrain de coopération et de résilience.
So he cannot evaluate all activities of the center, but he has himself been in charge of this seminar on sports and cross-border cooperation. And he said that he found it was a very interesting experience because it allowed for several reasons. First of all, we had different scientific disciplines who met, historians, political scientists, sociologists. And so they were discussing about the role of sports, not only for cross-border cooperation, also for European integration. And maybe the most important surplus value of the conference was that they also invited, he co-organized it with two other researchers, practitioners representing sport. And so there was, for example, the responsible person for cross-border cooperation for the Olympic Committee for the region of Grand Est, and somebody also from the Council of Europe, so different types of actors. And this interaction between actors and researchers was particularly interesting to discuss about the topic of resilience.
Thank you so much. And now I'm looking to Jean. You participated also in some of the activities of the center, but is there one that for you was more significant than the other?
Yes, I think so. It was the conference about the bilateral treaties. Birte mentioned it already, but I will perhaps explain a little bit more. We have a quite important treaty between France and Germany, which is the Aachen Treaty. I try to make it simple. But there are many things in this treaty, but there is one thing about cross-border cooperation, which was the fact that the two countries acknowledge in this treaty that it's important to have this local cross-border cooperation, but that the states, including at the national but also federal level for Germany, support this local cross-border cooperation and give opportunities and possibilities, competencies, financial means, and so on, to the local authorities to act. And this treaty created a committee, which is a multi-level committee involving as well the Länder, the regions, the national levels, I mean, Berlin and Paris, basically, and also members of the parliaments to control all that, to solve obstacles that appear at the border. And this treaty, which is now active since 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, it has been duplicated on French-Italian border with the Treaty of Quirinal and with Spain with the Treaty of Barcelona. And the great idea of Birte was to organize this conference involving all the ambassadors of these 4 countries working on this cross-border cooperation. So there was the French ambassador, the German ambassador, I simplify a little bit, the German ambassador, the Italian ambassador, the Spanish ambassador. And so there was a discussion about these 3 treaties that are different, because when 2 countries discuss and negotiate such a treaty, you have specificities, of course. And it was really interesting to learn about the things that are common to these 3 treaties, the things that are different, well, it was a great moment, and also I would say a very European moment, because there is now a new regulation that has been drafted at the European level, that is not voted yet, but it will come soon, and that will sort of apply or make it possible to apply such a system on every European internal border. So I would say yes, it was a good moment, because we had the ambassadors, we had the representatives of the local authorities, we had the academics that were also a little bit questioning the ambassadors. So yes, it was a great moment.
Thank you so much, Jean, for sharing this experience. And Bernard, I'm going back to you. What was your most significant experience in the center?
Of course, it was the seminar I mentioned a few minutes ago. In fact, it lasts 2 days, and it focuses on how to manage the COVID-19 crisis in different cross-border conurbation in Western Europe. We invited different academics, but also practitioners, and we had a real discussion. Despite European integration and the existence of a cross-border cooperation, mobility restrictions have been introduced by states on the EU's internal borders, and in March 2020, so exactly 5 years ago. And this has completely disrupted the everyday life of this cross-border conurbations. In particular, it affected the local economy, but also the healthcare system, as you just mentioned, for instance, between Luxembourg and France, but it was also the case in many other places, in Geneva, Basel, Saarbrücken, northern France, etc., etc. And also you have a lot of cross-border workers who are employed in other sectors, in services, trade, and so on. In fact, we made a comparison between several conurbations in Europe, and it showed the diversity of the situations and also of the responses given. However, in several cases, the role of the local authorities and the fact that the players involved in cross-border cooperation knew each other very well, made it possible to find solutions that have to be regularly adapted in line with changes in the lockdown or curfew rules instituted by the states. And this crisis situation demonstrated the difficulties of cross-border cooperation, but also and above all the complexity of vertical relations between the different levels of authority, between the states and the local and regional authority, as just Jean also mentioned. So multi-level governance is therefore a major issue in this cross-border conurbations. And compared with other areas, however, cities are home to a variety of players with a wide range of skills, but they need to be known by the local authorities and coordinated on both sides of the border. So it means the system, of course, was not very optimal, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Bernard, for having shared this experience with us. And now I'm very curious what you choose, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. And but I will make it short. It was the first seminar, and we talked about the definition of resilience in the different sciences. And the slide I remember is the slide of a slum. And the colleague said, oh, this is potentially the most resilient form of a city. And there I really learned something about making science accessible for other scientists. And that is what I really liked in this center, that all the scientists, specialists in their field, they always try to make their science accessible for the others. And as a law professor, I'm a bit handicapped in this kind of, because I'm very textual, I'm always trying to find some norms, legal definition of resilience, and I'm always a bit poor. And then I see the colleagues opening my mind, my legal mind, with their visualizations, with their ideas, with their definitions, and enriching my legal argumentarium of cross-border obstacle solving. And that's a moment I have often in this network, and therefore I'm really grateful for having participated in it.
Yeah, I didn't plan to say that, but this is very interesting that you say that, because for me it was just the contrary working with you in the center, because indeed, as Peter mentioned, we organized two, and this third will come, but two training session, mixing a practitioners target group with also Michael and Fred, the tandem of legal experts, and working on once on cross-border public services and one on cross-border obstacles. And for me, it was just the contrary, that those two legal experts make it so simple for the practitioners to understand that it was very constructive, and it was very, very interesting mixing those two approach, but not, you know, to have this experience from a professor, very technical, very precise, and not accessible to the practitioners or the students, but just on the contrary, making it applied for the practitioners to be used in their daily practice. So yeah, interesting that you say that. Yeah, but maybe having heard about all those experiences and all those activities in the center, you might have questions to our panelists on those activities. If this is the case, please just raise your hand. If this is not the case, no problem. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Not been actively involved in the seminar. I had the chance to open an activity that was managed by Michael Frey. This was a border walk. I was most impressed by the border walk. What is the idea of border walk? The idea was that we took the two classes, bilingual classes from Strasbourg schools, and the pupil went over the border. So physically, they experienced history, they experienced the border and how to overcome a border. And that was managed by an introduction by Michael and an excellent debriefing later on. There was the second border walk.
We had the first one from you.
Concept.
Yeah.
The concept was interesting because there were anthropologists from Maastricht who had this map, like, you know, the Harry Potter maps, you know, the way you know it, and it looked like a Harry Potter map, and the students were supposed to go across the border with a Harry Potter map and put things that they observed on the map. And they have actually scanned it. We have the results, and then afterwards there was an interpretation of this. Is how it started, and then Michael took it up and did a second one with a different concept, but very interesting also to have the historical explanation of the monuments, etc. At the borders, very different. And then we did one together. It's a really cross-border activity.
And now the idea is getting to be scaled. First of all, we do on the same walk between Kiel and Strasbourg, 3.5 kilometers, different topics: economy, cross-border mobility, history, whatever. And we can do on this 3.5 kilometers much of our disciplines of European topics. And we are going to scale it on Breisach-Neuf-Brisach and Basel German Railway Station. So we start to develop this idea of border walk for different target groups: pupils, students, incoming Erasmus students, researchers groups, guests, the Interreg Steering Committee will participate, and so on. We will have some different target group, civil society. And so we are trying to get this concept of invisible border and what does this mean today and which effects does a border have as a living topic, which is easily manageable by everybody. And that is our aim. And we'll start with e-scooters when they do not block at the border because of their geo-blocking and so on. we try to develop this kind of concept, and this is also idea I gained from this anthroposophic concept. Anthropologist. I apologize.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting thing. I thought, oh, I have to do it in an applied way for pupils and so on. And that was an idea I gained, and I tried to develop, and that is an take away from the center also.
And you already answered the last question I
sorry.
had. No, but the idea was maybe if there are no other questions from the audience, if this is.
I have a question to the Americans. Can you imagine doing a border walk in your
To Mexico.
from San Diego to Tijuana? Or I don't know, at the American-Canadian border?
Between Detroit and Windsor.
Or does that inspire? Is anybody from these regions? No. Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
Not personally, but my dad worked at the water for some time, and it's I mean they have border control in Tijuana and San Diego, but I mean easy, relatively easy to watch the border. That's why you have your pass, then you
can go, yeah.
Oh, it's interesting because it really it's different in Europe in the sense that both regions are really different, even though they are maybe 1 kilometer apart. The one region and but yeah, it's a completely different. I mean, I haven't done it, but I know.
Yeah, it's a completely. You have done probably. You've crossed the border here, so you could probably imagine that it's very.
Yeah, for example, I think that Hale and Kazakhstan are really integrated. I really made similar. Different of the very similar regions, the contrary of one or values or other regions.
Thank you for sharing this experience anyway. Yeah, different realities all around the world, I think. But this roundtable comes to an end, the center's coming to an end, and therefore I would like to hear from the panelists, because we heard that we learned a lot from all the activities that were organized within the center, and it would be too bad if everything would stop with the end of the center at the end of the summer, and if there should be one or two things that should stay, maybe should be developed in the future, what would it be? William, le centre va prendre fin très prochainement, et qu'est-ce que finalement, ça serait trop bête si tout s'arrêtait maintenant comme ça avec la fin de centre. Qu'est-ce qu'on doit garder et qu'est-ce qu'on doit poursuivre ou continuer ou développer ou approfondir?
Alors, je pense qu'il faut poursuivre sous des formes différentes. L'idée du centre aussi, c'était de disséminer les thèmes, notamment les thèmes de recherche ou d'enseignement, soit dans des masters qui existent ou des futurs masters, soit dans des programmes de recherche dans les laboratoires. Donc je pense que l'idée du centre, c'est un peu ça, c'est de disséminer. Moi, j'ai un exemple dans mon domaine. Une étudiante a suivi des séminaires et elle veut faire une thèse, un doctorat, sur le sport transfrontalier, qui est la première fois qu'il y a une thèse sur ces thématiques. Donc ça, c'est une idée de développement. Et moi-même, j'ai été amené, grâce aux activités du centre, à découvrir des border studies et à publier dans des revues, notamment le Journal of Borderland Studies. Je ne connaissais pas cette revue et j'ai publié des articles. Donc, la recherche se poursuit dans des publications qui pourront servir par la suite à d'autres chercheurs.
So, really things that we have to follow up. Of course, we have to continue the activities, but maybe in a different form, not necessarily as a center. He said that it's true that one of the objectives of the center is dissemination. That's a very important word for the European Commission, and that you can do that, for example, take up the topics that we are studying now in master degrees or future research. That could be a possibility. And he said that from his own experience, you can quote like two elements. First, that there's one student who followed one or other of our seminars, and she wants to now engage, to start a PhD on cross-border sports, and that's the first time that happens. And he himself has also discovered the border studies community and has already published in the ABS journal, which is the journal for, the ABS is really international, based in the USA, but they have also a European section, and so William was already published on sports and cross-border cooperation in that journal.
Thank you so much, William. Michael, you already mentioned the border walls. Is there anything else that we should continue and develop?
Yes, of course. There are many things. First of all, we shall continue to meet between the disciplines, between the colleagues, between scientists and practitioners, between scientists, practitioners and students and civil society. We shall also develop something which is innovative. So our job is to develop innovation together. So this center was for me always a space where we could share ideas and we could develop ideas together. And that is something I would like to keep. So we have to reflect on formats. How can we integrate students? How can we integrate the colleagues? How can we keep our network as a horizontal governance network also? How can we keep it innovative? And last part we should keep is as research. I mean, you students, you are 5 years, 6 years at a university, and then you go start your professional careers. For us professors, it's a bit different. Our professional careers is at least 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, probably in the same university. And so this center has one thing. We all, as we sit here, we share a part of our professional lifeline. And this kind of sharing or being part of the lifeline of a colleague is something very precious. And it makes our profession interesting, motivating, preventing us from petrifying in our scientific disciplines. And that is something we should keep. Just living our professional career together as scientific friends across the borders, across the disciplines, and that is what we shall keep, definitely.
A very nice perspective, anyway. Yeah. Jean, what should we keep or develop?
Yes, I would say keep and develop the connection between the local border issue and the European question. There is always a risk. I mean, I've been working specifically on borders for 15 years. It's always exciting, new ideas, but there is a risk that it remains a little bit peripheral. I remember 10 years ago, I was explaining to my friends, well, I do that, and they were listening kindly, but not that interested, in fact. I think things have changed now. I mean, it's easier for us to explain because of this crisis and all that, that there is something happening or not happening on these European borders. And I would say it's even more true since a couple of weeks, I would say. Now it seems that we have an eastern neighbor, that's not new, but that doesn't respect borders. And it might be, I leave it open because the worst is not sure, but we have a Western friend which seems to show ideas that he would not respect borders. And at that moment, we should really keep very solid between us and explain to Europeans that this the way to manage borders we created since 1945, that is basically we stop changing borders, but we just try to cooperate and to integrate across borders. It's really, or it should be in the heart of policies. And so I would say, yes, let's keep what we do here connected to the heart of European policies.
Thank you so much, Jean. Bernard, what would you keep or develop?
I think it's very difficult to add something after all my colleagues, because I think everything was said. Maybe I would say I would highlight 2 points. The first one is about continuity. In fact, we saw that resilience is better in borderlands when you have a continuity across the border between people, between stakeholders, between authorities, between political authorities. So I think it's very important to continue to develop knowledge on borders, and especially to show that a border, of course, it's a limit, it's an object of separation, but it's, even if you can cross very easily the border, even if you can overcome it, you're not fighting with your neighbor. And I think the development of knowledge, the development of meeting and of exchanges is very important, and also with the students. And the second one, I think that working on this cross-border areas is, in fact, it's a very serious game. That's all.
Thank you so much, Bernard. Thank you to all the panelists. I will close here this roundtable also by thanking the audience for the active participation. And I think you have food for thoughts now for the future. And I let you, you for the conclusion.
Yes,
for
yes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anne, for the
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to close, not the seminar, not the debate, not the reflection, but this meeting today. And actually, I also have an idea what we could do in the future. That was one element that actually we worked on during the last years here in this center, but actually also in the first generation of the center, but this training and education. I think it became clear we can believe in law, we can believe in institutions. That is a very important point. But the most important point is training actors. And we have master programs that do exist. And as part of our work here in the center, we also developed the idea of probably developing a specific master program which focuses on the qualification of future cross-border management of cross-border cooperation managers. So that is an idea that to professionalize cross-border cooperation. There is in the perspective, of course, still a lot of things to do. I started my career 30 years ago in an institution that is called Infobest. And Infobest is a citizen advice center. All the commuters that go over the border get an information if they have problems with the administration. And when the institution was created 30 years ago, we created a first activity report that presented a camembert structure of all the questions the citizens were asking. And had the chance to get the activity report of the same institution 30 years later. And I discovered the activity report and there were the same questions. And why are they the same questions? Because the administration, the legal systems have not evolved. So we have a lot of administrative, legal, administrative borders, which are obstacles to horizontal mobility. And the idea of this master program is to train people to identify obstacles and to develop strategies to overcome these obstacles. And that is a very interesting perspective, which we developed as part of our center, but actors and university actors from different border regions are invited to participate in the implementation of this program. We have just developed the core ideas, main competencies. So we will develop, first of all, a competence model on what is a good cross-border cooperation manager. What are the skills needed for that? And then we have basically 3 fields. European expertise, of course, you need to know exactly what Jean mentioned. The big strategies, the European framing, because border regions play an important role when it comes to implementing European strategies, which is very often overseen in Brussels. So strengthening knowledge about European expertise, EU legal competence, administrative space. There's knowledge of the European administrative space. The system of European territorial cooperation is an element, and all the European policy making to know how the horizontal and vertical governance system works. Then there are specific cross-border competencies that you need. First of all, cultural competencies, interdynamic knowledges, how to define a cross-border project, particularities in such kind of approach, and then, of course, what Michael mentioned, the instruments, the legal instruments, the tools, and the organizational forms that we have. And the third element are the methodological skills, which is management and leadership, how to lead such an approach, how to be resilient, how to develop approach of resilience, how to analyze obstacles and overcome them. And then there is also a sort of ACTA, we call it the applied comparative public administration, because you need to know the particularities of the system next of your neighbors, and of course also scientific work, how to work science. So we are about to reflect that, and all of you are invited because it is not necessarily a full-time master program. We thought also to do something based on e-learning methods as a part-time continuing master program. So whenever you discover this field and you within the cross-border cooperation, you can learn it. So that is the idea that we may train generations of future specialists of cross-border cooperation, and interdisciplinarity is a very important element of that. So I'm very happy having been part of this two exercises of the center, and our little university is of course committed to continue the third and the next generations. Next generation, I think it must be quite fashionable at the European level. The next speaker for the next generation of cross-border cooperation, and we'll be happy to work with you all on this very fascinating issue. Thank you very much.
One last thing about how to continue is, because I see Harald here, the resource is also the possibility always to link our work of the Center of Excellence with this beautiful chateau and with the SIPA Foundation, and with Uli, my dear friends Uli and Harald, who always support the castle talks and the center. And so this is, and by this way also to engage on a cross-border cooperation or communication between Americans and Europeans, which in current times could sometimes appear or become a little bit more difficult with the current governments in place everywhere in the United States and in Europe. So yes, so now we are going to have the aperitif, right, Harald?
Belle animation.
Merci. Hein, bien un stop.
Trop fin la réunion.